Hello, and welcome to the Product Alliance. Today, we'll be interviewing a Microsoft PM, and we'll be analyzing her answer to extract a few key techniques you'll need to ace your interview and earn a Microsoft offer letter. Pay attention to how this PM prioritizes single user groups, draws on her personal experience to add a unique twist to the interview, and draws a detailed chart to explore her chosen group's needs. And now, I'm going to hand it over to our host, Adi, who will be leading the interview.
Now let's dive into a product design question. Let's say that you wanted to design a better way to find a roommate when you're moving to a new city. How do you go about thinking about this problem?
Well, the first thing I would do is sort of think through our subset of users. Who are the people who are looking for roommates in a new city? I'm just going to list off a few groups. Young professionals who are moving to a new place, seeking opportunity, moving to a new city to work somewhere. Maybe people who have gone through a really big life change where they're just looking for a fresh start. I think within this group, the subset could be recent divorcees who are looking to move somewhere new and might not know anyone in that city. We have new college students who are embarking on the next chapter of their lives. They are looking to pair up with usually roommates who are also enrolled in the same undergraduate university and in similar stages of life. So kind of let's narrow down these user groups. We had those people who are going through looking for fresh starts. I think in general, people who are, looking for a sort of fresh start might be a little bit more developed in their career. This might be a career move that they're making after establishing themselves a bit. They may have already lived alone for a period of time, and so they might not be looking for another shared living situation. People who are maybe in that group of, let's say, like 30 to 40 to 50 years old. For new college students, a lot of them are first year students, and so there's already sort of a built-in network of organized by whatever college or university for finding roommates to live with, and so they might already have these needs met. I think that one of the most interesting groups to me and that I can personally relate to is young professionals aged 20 to 30 who are moving to a new city for the first time, who are looking to meet people, make friends, and are really eager for a shared living situation.
Sabrina does a great job at thinking of three very different user groups, but more importantly, she's able to eliminate two of them with no hesitation. Far too many candidates waffle on their choices of user group, never fully committing to one. Interviewers want to see you be decisive and keep building on your momentum. So make sure you do exactly what Sabrina did and move to the next stage without any fear.
So let's dive into this group a little bit more by exploring their needs. And I'm just sort of going to brainstorm and jot down a needs. I think in this situation, this relates really well to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is a pyramid of needs that all humans have. It starts at the bottom for very core, basic physiological needs. So this includes food, this includes shelter. I think that's the very first basic need if someone's looking for roommates in a new city and looking for apartments that they're trying to find. We then go up the pyramid toward things that are more related to emotional growth, mental growth, and love and belonging. And I think that this is a space where friendship really comes into play, where people all have this need for sort of a sense of connection and community. Everyone feels like they want to have a community, they can make friends, and they can really fit into their area. There, some of the factors where individual preference really comes into play with roommates might be, well, of course, there's the cost of rent, different people's willingness to spend in different situations. There's the question of whether it's safe. That's one that I personally very much relate to, being a young woman who moved to a new city by herself. Location, as they always say in real estate, depending on where you work, proximity to an employer, closeness to bus lines, especially if one is really inclined to use public transit to commute to work, in preference of taking a car or something like that. Maybe how modern it is, how clean it is. There are all of these different factors that really at the end of the day come down to a person's individual preferences.
This was an awesome mind map from Sabrina. Notice too how she listed both the functional and the emotional needs of her chosen user group. Functional needs include things like rent and being close to public transit. They're physical attributes that the area and the house both need to have. Most candidates get those, but they miss the emotional needs, the need for friendship, for pursuing your interests, for feeling safe, and for having fun at night. These are just as important to mention as functional requirements, and they're especially important to mention given how few people notice them. Sabrina did great at calling out both.
And I think what's interesting about this too is a person might not even know at the moment what questions to be asking when exploring a particular roommate, which might be something that I'll explore later on in thinking through this design process and this design question. So we've brainstormed through a few needs and we've brainstormed through a few goals. Now kind of let's move a little bit further along in our design process past need finding and past sort of exploring user needs, and let's think through observing users in the wild. And so I'm going to call back on my experience to be able to understand with myself and with friends, what was that process actually like after graduating college and moving to a new city and finding people to live. I moved to Seattle. I'm thinking of friends who've moved to San Francisco, friends who've moved to New York, and there are a lot of patterns that I've seen and noted in this process. So I think generally when moving to town, there's a little bit of a spectrum of, I'm moving somewhere where I don't know anyone at all, or I'm moving somewhere where maybe there's a bit of an alumni network where I have friends, family, friends of friends. And so that really sets the stage for how people go about looking for their roommates. I think in general, people are more likely to start with the people that they know if they have that. And so that might be reaching out directly to friends that they know via direct lines of communication. The next stage after that might be trying to reach out to friends of friends. And so that might be asking people that they know, hey, is there someone who you know who's moving to town along a similar timeline? One thing which I really want to mention that's important here is when looking for a roommate, kind of one of the initial selection criteria that people have is when they're looking to move. And so often we see postings that say, hey, looking for a female roommate who's looking to move somewhere in August. And so similar move-in timelines would be something that people highly prioritize in this, because otherwise you're paying potentially a month or two of dead rent. Next up might be Facebook groups. There are very many Facebook groups for people who are moving to new cities, just kind of from a quick search of subletting in New York, subletting in Seattle, subletting in San Francisco. And so people might proactively look for roommates. Because of this, if you're looking for a roommate, you might look for people who are looking for roommates, or you might post yourself. And so I think what's really nice is you can either be the sender or the recipient in that experience. In that spectrum of people you know to people you don't know, there is also looking for roommates through Craigslist or other ways. There's a lot of risk that comes with doing that, because there's not necessarily that same degree of friend of a friend, where there's that accountability that someone you trust also trusts this person or can vouch for them. So kind of just thinking through this process and some of the pain points, one of the things that comes to mind is, hey, this sounds, it's really individual based. It sounds a little bit like online dating, and it has some of the same pain points associated with online dating, where, as I said, accountability, understanding what another person's needs are, understanding what another person's expectations are, and understanding sort of their constraints.
This is a great user journey map from Sabrina. This question was pretty straightforward, but Sabrina isn't trying to hurry through it. She knows she'll have plenty of time, and she decides to use that time to showcase as many skills as she possibly can. In this case, she shows off her ability to make flowcharts, and more importantly, her ability to get inside users' heads and identify exactly how they're thinking. The latter is a crucial skill for a PM, and Sabrina is showing that she has it in spades.
So one of the ideas that I have for this, for improving the roommate finding process, is building a hinge for roommates. This hinge for roommates would sort of utilize a lot of the functionality and features of Hinge that make it really popular and appealing for consumers. So, I mean, of course, this being an application for roommates rather than for potential romantic partners, it's going to be less looks based, but at the same time, I think that social media and pictures can convey a lot about a person and their personality. And so, of course, there would still be integration with apps like Facebook and Instagram to be able to see what someone's life is like and who they are at their core, who they are as a person. Another really great thing about Hinge is it actually requires that its users fill out prompts, verbal prompts that are just these fun, quirky sort of questions that get to let you know who someone is. And so that would really help with having people share more about themselves in a way that might not necessarily be natural if they were just asked to write a Facebook post or a free-form essay. Another wonderful feature about Hinge is it has all of these entry fields for things that are important for how people, for the things that people might want in a partner for a potential relationship, such as religion or level of commitment, whether you're looking for something more casual or more serious. And so similarly for this app, Hinge for Roommates, we would prompt users to provide information about things that are important to them that they might not even have realized that were important to them.
Sabrina shows really quick thinking by realizing that the roommate hunting process is similar to the romance finding process. So she comes up with a simple but catchy idea of Hinge for Roommates. Interviewers often take a day or two to write up feedback reports, so it's essential to have ideas that are easy to understand and easy to remember. Catchy names like the one that Sabrina came up with are sure to stick in the interviewer's minds, and thus will help ensure that she gets a strong rating even if the interviewer waits a day or two before submitting their feedback.
And so kind of just going back to the need finding diagram that we built earlier, what we were thinking of with needs were, what's your rent? What's your desired rent? That would be a category here. It would be, comfort with floors, where it's located, since that's a factor related to safety. How important cleanliness is to you. Phrased in a way that's really palatable to people, whether it's like, so I think like the verbiage and the language that we're using here really matters a lot. Of course, no one would identify themselves as like dirty or messy, and so it would be more like a little bit of mess doesn't bother me, versus, all of my friends kind of describe me as a neat freak. I think that this would be a really great way of having people kind of get acquainted with potential roommate candidates, and it would be a way of facilitating all of those conversations between people. So this sort of app really helps get at people's literal needs, such as, finding a roommate who is on your same timeline. But I think there's a little bit more that it can do to get at people's deeper, more emotional needs, like previously referenced when talking about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. These needs for love and belonging, for esteem, and for self-actualization. I'm thinking of systems that work really well for getting people to be embedded within communities while still solving the practical needs of cost-effective housing. When we were first thinking through our user groups, one of the first groups of users that I referenced were new college students who were being introduced into dorms. What if we tried bringing the aspects that college dorms facilitate in terms of bringing community from not just that environment, but into the real world and to apartment complexes? I envision that we would create some sort of large house or apartment unit with 1 or 2 person rooms, including personal bathrooms and kitchens, but with really large common areas. Some of these shared facilities in the common areas might be a shared gym, a shared garden, or a shared library. One sort of trick is that the management company or the startup company, we would go ahead and we would personally make sure that people fit specific criteria to enter into the apartment. While at the same time balancing the need for a really diverse community. I think that it's important that people are represented from all different walks of life and different experiences, but the most important thing is that they all share the desire for getting to know the people who are around them and to understand community. There are some things that we definitely need to work through and some potential risks. The first is there's a lot of similar solutions that have been pitched in the housing market that maybe have bad raps for one person or another. Single room occupancy places often get a bad rap for just being these really small places without very much life. Boarding houses fell out of favor a long time ago, and sometimes people think of co-op living as a little bit weird, hippie, or alternative. And so we would have to navigate all of that. The second would be cost. There's certainly a large maintenance cost in upkeeping shared facilities. And so I think one thing that might be nice is having dedicated people who live on staff, who live on site, who can be part of that community as well, while having more of an active paid role.
Sabrina shows a strong ability to critique her own work here by calling out the risks of her college dorm idea. Interviewers love asking you to pick out flaws in your ideas so you can look really strong, as Sabrina did by doing this proactively. The insight about social stigma was powerful, and it shows Sabrina's soft skills and knowledge of human frailties, which are things that Microsoft in particular really likes to see.
And so I think if designed really well, we have these two ideas. There is the hinge for roommates, where we could figure out some of the social dynamics of it, and it doesn't deal with any of the actual physical housing, but rather just facilitates those connections. And we have this college dorm idea, which is actually much more about the physical space that people are in and about generating that sense of community. I think that either of those ideas could fundamentally shape the roommate searching experience and perhaps be even used in tandem.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you for that. So when thinking about this, if we had to just think about the short-term and long-term goals, you did a great job of walking me through the goals, the user needs, tying them into the experiences that you would build. How do you go about thinking about would you release the first version, like where you're making the hinge app like short term, and then focus on like doing partnerships longer term for this like housing community and figuring out the plan there? How do you like balance these two big priorities?
That's a great question. I think that we would have to develop some sort of risk framework to balance short term and long term. And so, just kind of when I'm assessing different risks in terms of how long it would take to see these ideas come to fruition, how long would it take before we would actually start generating a profit, how much capital would we have to invest before receiving a return. I think that it is much more exciting of an opportunity, of a business opportunity to think through this Hinge for Roommates app. Because the actual cost of starting it's all software engineering and that's it. We would build this app, we would integrate with third parties for authentication and for pulling from social profiles. And then we would do a lot of publicity and word of mouth, because the thing is, the app's only as appealing as the people who are on it. And so I think if we can have a few high profile users or success stories of the app, that would make it really appealing to others. And so what I love about it is it's actually not that much cost to implement. Perhaps at first it can be a little bit like of a handheld experience where a lot of these relationships might even be facilitated by the app and where we can really help pair people. And then eventually that could grow into some sort of program where we look into existing apartment buildings that might have a lot of vacancies and then try to negotiate deals between the people who are matching up as roommates with these management companies in order to build that community, that sort of same space where people have that sense of friendship and sense of connection that they're looking for, where it's not just their physical needs, but also their emotional needs being met.
Wonderful. Thank you for that answer.
All around, this was a great answer from Sabrina. At the beginning, she drew in a framework she knew, Maslow's hierarchy of needs, to shape her thinking around user needs. If you can draw on ideas from other domains, like Sabrina did, you'll show that you're a well-rounded thinker and not just your average techie. Toward the middle, Sabrina skillfully brought in her own experiences, and she didn't just tell us what she did. She told us how she felt at each step of the process. This is really important, especially at Microsoft, where every question has a slight behavioral bent to it, and every interviewer wants to see what you're like as a person. Sabrina showed a lot of empathy and connection with her own emotional needs, which are things that Microsoft really values. And toward the end, notice how Sabrina didn't restrict herself to thinking of her ideas as mutually exclusive. She thought of ways to blend her two ideas, Hinge and dorms, together, creating a compelling and creative end-to-end strategy that most candidates never would have thought of. And she even started talking about the business strategy of apartment building, occupancy rates and the like, which showed an additional versatility on her end. She used a design question to show sides of her that would normally only come out in behavioral and strategy interviews, and this was instrumental in giving her a 10 out of 10 answer. Thanks, Adi, for a really insightful interview. While most candidates would have robotically applied a clunky 5 or 7-step framework to this question, Sabrina used a simple but fluid and flexible approach, starting with the why and moving on to the who and then to the what. Along the way, she did an amazing job using the whiteboard to detail user groups, user journeys, and user needs. You'll learn how to use Sabrina's approach yourself when you enroll in the Product Alliance's full flagship Microsoft PM interview course. You'll also learn techniques for whiteboarding more effectively and even doing a remote interview. If you liked the insights from this lesson, imagine multiplying it by 40, since the full flagship Microsoft course includes over 40 video lessons just like this one. Each one includes the whiteboard graphics and expert commentary you saw in this lesson too. Plus, we'll give you the lowdown on Microsoft's 10-year roadmap, along with product strategy teardowns for Azure, Teams, Office, Xbox, GitHub, and more. And we'll even throw in a list of interview questions that our team members and past customers have actually gotten in their recent Microsoft interviews. We update our list every month, so you can study with the questions you might get asked word for word. This flagship Microsoft course was developed with the input from over a dozen different product leads from across Microsoft, so we're confident that it'll give you a huge leg up over the thousands of other competitors who have already read the same few interview prep books. And since the course will be yours for life, you'll be able to land offers from Microsoft both now and later in your career. Thanks again for watching, and we hope to see you again. Remember that today's lesson was just the tip of the iceberg, so make sure you click below to check out the full flagship Microsoft course.